Hey, I'm John Strohmeyer with Strohmeyer Law. Welcome to today's live stream. Today we're talking about some bad advice you're going to get from the internet. Unfortunately, the advice is free, but it could cost you a lot. There are a lot of opinions out there. We're going to walk through a couple of the bad things that I've seen online. Now, as we have questions, drop them in the chat. I will answer them to the best that I can while we are here. Also, don't forget, like and subscribe. Make sure you get updated when we've got new videos. Finally, while I am a lawyer, I am not your lawyer. This is not specific advice for you. Go talk to somebody you've paid to help you with your own situation. So with that out of the way, what is the first question we've got about bad advice from the internet? Explain the real pros and cons of bridge trusts. Okay, so I will see things called bridge trust. They come under all sorts of other different types of names, but this is the one that I've seen most recently. A bridge trust, any of these kind of trusts that are promising things that are too good to be true, usually are too good to be true. The reality is most of us don't really need some heavy-duty foreign asset protection trust, and that's what this comes under. Bridge trust is meant to be something that, hey, it's going to have all of your assets for you, plus your creditors can't get to anything. Here in Texas, something like this really isn't going to fly. It's not going to let you do much more than you could do. I mean, really, it's not going to let you do almost anything that you couldn't already have done without, some capitalized bridge trust with trademark or whatever. And again, what I'm talking about here is going to be applicable to most foreign asset protection trusts. So let's bring this back for a minute and think about what are people trying to do with these trusts? Primarily, they're worried about getting sued. When we think about getting sued and asset protection, the first question is, well, who's going to sue you and why would they sue you? It comes usually in three different flavors. One, there's some sort of business liability. You run a business and you're worried that you might incur some liability. You're a doctor and a patient might sue you. You're a lawyer and a patient might sue you for malpractice. You have a business and you just don't want it to get sued by anybody. Flavor number two, some sort of personal liability. This is usually in the realm of I'm getting married and I don't want a future ex-spouse to take my stuff, so can we put assets there and protect it from them? Finally, realm three of asset protection is, well, they are going to sue me. Something else, I'm going to get sued for something else. I can't tell you who or what. There's no defined threat, but I want to be protected against them. Asset protection trusts are meant to help you whichever variety of threat you're worried about. Business threat, a personal threat, or an unknown generic threat. The problem is most asset protection is ultimately just some sort of negotiating stance. Look, we've got these assets. It's going to cost you more to go get them. So wouldn't it be better if you just settled for a lesser amount? If you have a lawsuit, the asset protection trust really only helps at the very end of the scenario. This is after you've been sued, you have lost, and they have a judgment against you, and now they're trying to collect on the assets. So they look around and say, oh, well, you've got that business and you've got that brokerage account. Why don't you give those to me in satisfaction of your obligations? If you have this foreign asset protection trust, that means the trustee who owns the assets is living in some foreign jurisdiction like Jersey or Guernsey or the Cook Islands or Liechtenstein, somewhere fabulously far away. It's going to be very difficult and expensive for your creditor to go get your asset. And that's kind of the idea with this bridge trust. We're going to have the ability to move your assets abroad if there is a lawsuit against you. Now, here's the other thing. You've already gone through a lawsuit, so you've had to pay for that. The trust isn't going to protect you against that lawsuit. It's not going to protect you in terms of the legal costs. You've got this hanging out there. Really, it's the last line of defense. We're going to protect you, hopefully, after you've been sued and they're trying to collect. What makes way more sense, and what I tell clients to think about is, if you're worried about this, why don't you have insurance for whatever you're doing? Insurance exists for multiple purposes. That's what it should be there for. And so you've got that sort of stuff protecting you. Okay, well, we've gotten to the end. Let's just assume they've sued and they're collecting. how is this going to work? Well, the idea with the bridge trust is it's a domestic trust now. You're trustee of your own trust. And if something happens, if there's a trigger that's filed because you're out of assets or you've lost or the trust, you, the trustee, makes a determination to move stuff abroad, then it goes to some foreign trustee. Well, here's the thing, at least here in Texas, this is going to be a self-settled trust. It's not going to be irrevocable, or it's going to be a revocable trust because that's not going to trigger any bad tax consequences for either income tax or estate tax purposes. So like it's totally see-through. Here in Texas, something like that would be automatically controllable by you. And the fact that you put it in a trust and maintain control over it for the entire time doesn't get beyond the 4-year look-back period for fraudulent transfers. And remember, fraudulent transfers is a body of law in just about every state that says, look, you may have put assets beyond the reach of your creditors, but there are some rules to this, and you can't just put stuff where they can't get it. So if you've done something to delay, hinder, or defraud your creditors, like, I don't know, putting them with a foreign trustee in a hard-to-get-to jurisdiction, you're going to trigger a fraudulent transfer analysis. And the creditor's going to go through this, and if they find that you've done these things to delay, hinder, or defraud them as a creditor, you're going to be in trouble. Like, the court's not going to like it. They're probably going to assess costs against you. And in extreme cases, they may throw you in jail for contempt until you tell that trustee to bring those assets back. But wait, it's a foreign trustee. I can't control them. They're using your assets to pay their fees. I bet they will listen if you picked up the phone and said, hey, make a distribution. That's almost certainly what I would expect a judge to say if they saw, oh, you've got Dave's creditor defeating asset protection trust in the Cook Islands that you set up yourself. Bring those assets back and you can sit in jail until you're ready to do so. So just at the outset, something like this where it's promising you're going to protect your assets, I just don't like it. I think it's overselling what is already out there. So what else is out there? One of the things they think about with a bridge trust, you're going to maintain some flexibility. And, like, oh, we don't have to be a foreign trust, which will trigger all sorts of complicated and expensive IRS filings, not until you actually need it. Okay, fine. That's just a revocable trust, with some options for changing jurisdiction. That's not really much more flexibility than you had now. If you wanted to, any revocable trust could do it. All it's saying is, if we want to, we'll move it to a foreign jurisdiction. And, other reasons they like, oh, well, we can put more control over what happens. There's nothing new or different about this. Again, asset protection is all about how can you give things away or put them in such a structure that it's available to you, but not available to your creditors. And for the most part, at least here in Texas, we have some pretty strong state laws for asset protection. 401ks, IRAs, your homestead, these things receive generous protection. And so setting up a trust like this really isn't going to give you any more. And it really just, why would you need to do that? So what you are going to get, you're going to get much higher costs. The compliance costs for this with the IRS are going to be that you're going to be filling out 3520, 3520As, 8938s, probably FBARs. These are all expensive forms, and depending on how you've structured it, that's going to be a significant cost. It really is something that you're really not getting too much benefit for this. So, in terms of pros, you're writing in some extra language that says you can move to a foreign jurisdiction if you get sued. Okay, and that's not unreasonable. It's a good negotiating point if you're ever sued and somebody comes after you and wins. But I think this gets outweighed by the cons. Cons, I think it is overwhelmingly way more complicated, and it's way overpromising what it is. It's basically a revocable trust. It's not getting you any tax benefits. It's not getting you that you couldn't get with any other trust. The asset protection issues are minimal at best and really overwhelmed by the fact that if you can control this trust while you're still here, there's not going to be a court in Texas, at least, that will probably let you get away with that. Of just, oh, neener, we've put our assets in the Cook Islands and now you can't get to it. You're probably going to be held in contempt and you'll be forced to repatriate those assets at your own expense in favor of your creditors. Like, is that really a great idea? No. Like when it comes to asset protection, as with so much else, like, yes, this is, there may be some thoughts on this, but there's not a whole lot to say that this is going to be your one bullet. So, when it comes to these, I would just say save your money, regular trust, normal asset protection, not some branded trust is going to be your best option. So, with that, let's go to our next question. Should I create a Delaware or Wyoming corporation for my business? Here's kind of the quick answer for this to start out with. Are you located or are you doing business actually in Delaware or Wyoming? The answer is no. That is also going to be your answer for this question. You really should not be setting up multiple different layers of businesses if you're not doing business there. All you're doing is increasing your complexity and your compliance costs, and you're not going to get any benefits. But John, all of the big businesses set up in Delaware. But John, Wyoming doesn't charge any income tax. That may be, but you're not necessarily going to get much of a benefit by having one layer of an entity in between you and anything else that you have. For one, you're going to have to think about doing business in your own state. So if somebody were here in Texas and we could form an LLC here in Texas, or we could form an LLC in Wyoming to run a business, well, we're going to form it here in Texas. That's where the entity is going to be doing business. If we had a Wyoming LLC doing business in Texas, guess what? You've then paid for your Wyoming LLC filing fees. Then you get to pay to register to do business here in Texas as a foreign LLC. You still get to file all of your other IRS tax forms, plus you'll get to file a tax return for Texas if you're doing business here. So that's the no tax due report if you're under the 1 point whatever million threshold, or you'll just be paying margin tax. Like, this is, you're not going to get anything by having that Delaware or by having that Wyoming corporation. But Wyoming doesn't charge taxes. You're right. And guess what? You're still going to have to be on the hook for IRS federal taxes and Texas controller state taxes. Like, none of that changed. Layering in one more thing with Delaware doesn't get you anything. You're not going to be able to do any real planning between two layers if it's you owning everything all the way down. Having a holding corporation, it's there for consolidation of management. It's not there to give you any real tax benefits. So thinking that that's going to change anything really is a mistake. Aha! But what about Delaware? The answer is going to be the same. Look, I know almost every major corporation is formed in Delaware or organized under Delaware, or they move there so that they can get acquired. Until that's on the hook, or even a potential for you, it's a waste of time and effort. Again, you're going to have to register in Delaware, then you're going to have to register back in your home state to do business. But unless you're looking to do business in Delaware, it doesn't add anything. It's just going to be a waste of time. You're not going to get anything new or better. But why do all those big corporations go there? The big corporations go there because then they know they can get into the Delaware courts of chancery, and it's more streamlined, it's more effective for business litigation. If you're not worried about that, if you're not thinking about getting acquired or IPOing in a way that makes sense, it's a waste of time and effort for you. Like, just why? What? There's no trophy. Well, I mean, I guess you could make your own trophy if you want. I've got a Delaware corporation or I've got a Wyoming LLC, but it's not going to do anything for you. It's not going to make your business run better. You're not going to pay less in taxes. If you've got a business, you run it where it is. So don't waste your money on it. All right, next question. Getting back to asset protection. If I move my assets offshore, my creditors can't find them or take them, can they? Well, they may be able to find them, and they might be able to force you to take them. So just putting your assets abroad just to put them abroad isn't always the best plan. Really, when you start moving things abroad, the IRS over the years has realized that U.S. taxpayers occasionally would put things abroad, then maybe not tell the IRS exactly how much they made or everything they knew about it. And over the years, IRS has been successful in getting Congress to add more and more foreign asset reporting requirements. What this means is there's a lot of things you have to fill out and tell the IRS about if you own something outside the US. And at this point, really, unless it's real estate abroad, you're going to be telling the IRS what you have and the income you're making abroad. There are no secret tricks for how the wealthy are offshoring their assets and then not paying income tax on it. If you've heard that, that is also bad tax advice too. It really is, once you move stuff abroad, you're going to be telling the IRS about it. If we're worried about creditors, well, when you are in a lawsuit and you get sued and they win, there's going to be some additional discovery during the collections phase where you have to tell, if you're not going to go ahead and immediately pay off whatever is owed to your creditors, they're probably going to sue you again and say, look, we can't collect on this. And they're going to go through discovery to make you tell them where your stuff is. Then they're probably going to get attorney's fees if you're dragging your feet or you're not telling them. And here's the other thing. Your lawyer is going to be on the hook as well for what you do or don't tell them. And if you're not being completely honest about what you have and where it is, it's going to be a problem. It's not going to be well, I'm not going to tell them, or I'm just going to hide this. Again, this gets into a body of law called fraudulent transfers. And if you're delaying, hindering, or otherwise defrauding your creditors, you're going to get in a lot of trouble. And it's just, like I as an attorney, I've gotten calls like this before. Hey, my client is getting sued, and can we take his truck and put it in an LLC? It's like, well, no. It's the same idea. Putting it in an entity so it's not in your name is the same as putting it abroad. What you're doing is trying to slow things down. It's not going to work, and it's only going to get both of us in trouble. Frankly, it's not worth my time for that. Another thing I've seen is where people who have already been sued calling and saying, well, what can we do to protect from getting sued or from collections? And the answer is it's too late. Once you've got this lawsuit against you, once you've got a judgment against you, things are done. What can you do on the front end? Well, the basics of having the right insurance in place for asset protection, then using the statutory protections of your homestead and the assets that are protected, like 401ks, IRAs, life insurance. This is going to do way more than some, sparkly trust in a foreign jurisdiction. The basic thing you need to do is run your business like a normal business and not think about, potential creditors who may or may not show up. If you run your business the right way, even when mistakes happen, there should be the protection of normal insurance and to cover what will happen. So, can you move your assets abroad? You can. It's still likely to be found by your creditors when you need to pay the bills. And even then, you're probably going to have to bring it back. So I don't recommend putting assets abroad. I don't think it gets you anything. I think it's just going to increase your compliance costs with the IRS. So I think that was our last call or our last question for this week. Thanks so much for watching. We'll be back in 2 weeks.